Okay, welcome Year 9s. It's Miss McGinley here. This is the video that goes with the webinar that took place on Friday the 22nd of January. Those of you who were present in that webinar, thank you very much, firstly for attending and also for your patience with all the technical difficulties we had on that day. So due to the technical problems, we couldn't record the webinar, so we are doing that now. So you're used to how these science webinars or how webinars in general work by now. So this webinar can be used and watched again and again to help you with the work while you're completing it. So please do use it as much as you like. We're not testing any of your memories. We want you to use the resources that we've given you. And also feel free to email your class teachers if you are stuck or have any particular questions. So by the end of this webinar, you will be clear on what it is expected of you, but just to let you know now, your work for this week will be to complete a Google Form quiz on the webinar. There'll also be a worksheet to complete, and you'll be doing pages 58 and 59 in the Orange Book. If you are in school, you can do the work in the Orange Book if you have it with you. If not, ask one of the teachers and they can go and get it for you. If you're at home, absolutely fine, you can complete it on paper. We have uploaded pictures of the relevant pages, so you can either complete it on paper and take a picture of it and upload your picture as your answers, or you can put it on a Google Docs and you can maybe put like page 58, question 1, and then your answer, etc. I hope that's clear. So, firstly, really well done for your work last week. We're really impressed with the quality of work and also the amount you all got through, which was absolutely excellent. We were having to give you guys more work, which was brilliant, so well done. I just wanted to quickly talk about one question that came up in the Google form. There was one where there was a slight mistake on it. So this question here, it said, what is a mixture? So the answer is actually this middle one. A mixture contains different substances that are not chemically joined to each other, which most of you put the correct answer for, so well done. The other answer, two or more different elements chemically combined or bonded together, is actually a definition of a compound. So well done, those of you who spotted that, and sorry for that. I hope that didn't cause any confusion when you got your marks back. So please do make a note of that somewhere and make sure you're really clear on the difference between a mixture and a compound. Okay, moving on with this week's webinar. So bear with me. Okay, this week we are looking again at our trusty periodic table. This is your Bible for chemistry. When you're in class, you'll get one to stick in your book and you can refer to it always. There will be one uploaded to the Google Classroom that you can use. Okay, so where do we find metals and non-metals on the periodic table? What is a compound? You're going to be able to recognise and identify common compounds, and we're going to be forming simple word equations together. If you're not sure what a word equation is, don't worry, because you will by the end of the lesson. So, in the webinar, these questions were put up as polls. So what is the name of the table where you find the names of all the elements? So if you're watching back this video, maybe you've got a piece of paper in front of you, you could just make a note down of what you think the answers are to these questions and then see if you get them right. So what is the name of the table where you find the names of all the elements? Where in an atom are all the protons and neutrons found? So to give you a hint, if we remember, this over here is our diagram of an atom. So I'll give you 10 seconds to think about that. Okay, so you find all the elements in something called the periodic table. So well done to you if you got that correct. And the protons and neutrons are all found in the nucleus of an atom. Now, this word nucleus is one that you've heard before when we were doing biology, when you were learning about the cell. Now, you all learned the parts of the cell so well, but I know that some of you are now going to be thinking, wait a minute, I've definitely heard that word before. And it's correct, you have. And the word is the same. I know that's confusing. But I just want to make it really clear the difference between an atom and a cell. An atom is much smaller than a cell. Atoms, in fact, make up everything, including cells. But both the cell and an atom have something called a nucleus. But what you might remember is that in both of them, the nucleus is the part in the center. So in a cell, it's the part in the center of the cell, and in the same way in an atom, it's the part in the center of the cell. So back to atoms. In the nucleus is what I'm circling here with the cursor. It contains the protons, which are these positively charged particles here, and the neutrons, which are these particles without a charge here. So we say that they're neutral because they don't have a charge. I want you just to think to yourself, can you remember the name of this other subatomic particle? Subatomic particle means a particle that's in the atom. So hopefully some of you are able to remember that these ones around the outside with a negative charge are called electrons. So we have electrons, protons, and neutrons. Okay, first of all, having a look at our periodic table. Now, your periodic table can be divided up into metals and non-metals. So the main groups that you guys are going to have to know about are the ones that we've numbered here. So we can see that all of the metals in group 1 and all of the elements in group 1, all of the elements in group 2 are metals, and then for group 0 and group 7, they're all non-metals. Most of group 6 are also non-metals, as are most of group 5. Group 3 and 4 gets a little bit more blurred, but the main groups you guys are going to need to know about are group 6 and 7, 0 and 1 and 2. So if you're not sure if something is a metal or non-metal, have a look at where it is on the periodic table. If it's over on the left side or in the middle, you know it's a metal. If it's over on the right side, it's likely a non-metal. So some key non-metals that you will see again and again in chemistry are oxygen, which is a symbol of O. See if you can look back now and find out what group oxygen's in. Carbon, which is a symbol of C. I want you to have a look for the group of carbon as well. And nitrogen, which is an N. Now, oxygen is in group 6 and carbon is in group 5. So, moving on. Okay, if you already did this in the webinar, you don't have to do this. If you didn't, pause the video and see if you can match the word, the correct element name to the correct symbol. So write them down next to each other. Okay, so I'm just going to go through some of the answers for you. So if you haven't had a go at this, pause the video now and do this. So oxygen, the symbol for oxygen is O, symbol for sodium is Na, symbol for chlorine is Cl, carbon is C, and hydrogen is H. Don't worry, you'll never have to memorize the periodic table as such, but it is really important to that you are able to find your elements quickly on the periodic table, so it's good if you know them by their symbols, and you will be expected to recognize the symbols, even if you don't have to remember all the other information about them on the periodic table. Now you may have noticed there's one that wasn't matched to anyone. That's this H2 over here, so we're going to talk a bit more about that now. So in the webinar, we asked questions and talked a bit about why. So this is H2O. Now what this means is that this H, as we know, is hydrogen. So because there's a little 2, this little 2 only refers to the element that it comes just after. So it's nothing to do with the oxygen here, even though they're part of the same compound. So we know this is a compound because it's made up of 2 different elements. So remember, in a compound, when there's 2 or more elements chemically joined together. If it was a mixture, they wouldn't be attached together as one. So if they're all put together in one formula, then you know it's a compound. So H2O, so the H2 means it's 2 hydrogen atoms, and the 1O means it's 1 oxygen atom. So a H2O molecule looks like this. Hopefully some of you are recognizing the the word H2O because it represents water. So the common word for H2O is water. So here's another really common compound, so it's important you're familiar with this as well. So we can see that the C, there's only one C, there's no number attached to it, so there's 1 carbon and there's 2 oxygens attached, so just like in this diagram, and this is what we know as carbon dioxide, another really common gas. Okay, so we have some new keywords here. So some of them you'll be familiar with from last week's webinar, but just to refresh. Element is a substance made up of just one type of atom. The symbols are the letters used to represent the elements on the periodic table. Compound, 2 or more elements chemically joined together. And the formula is the symbols that show the atoms present in a compound. So for example, our CO2 or our H2O. Okay, we're going to think for a moment about what we've learned about compounds and the difference between compound and mixtures. So you might remember back to the chocolate video that we looked at last week when comparing the difference between compound and mixtures. If you don't remember that, feel free to go back and have a look. It's in last week's webinar. So I want you to have a think now. One of these is a compound, and one of these is an element. So I want you to write down on a bit of paper in front of you, or just think in your head, is A a compound or element, and is B a compound or element? Okay, now you've had some time to think about that. I can tell you the answer is A is a compound, because we can see there's two different atoms joined together here, and B is an element because it's made up of just one type of atom. So you can see they're all light blue here. Okay, your worksheet in Google Classroom is actually related to what we looked at just back here. So you're going to be asked to identify what elements are present just from looking at the formula. So like we said here, from CO2, we can see that there's carbon present and there's oxygen present because of the symbols there. H2O, we know there's hydrogen and we know there's oxygen. So please do come back and look at this part of the video while you're doing the worksheet if you're not sure. So we'll do one together. What elements are present in NH3? Feel free to pause the video now and have a look back on your periodic table. So we know that N is nitrogen, so that's one we looked at earlier in the activity, and H is hydrogen, so we know that nitrogen and hydrogen are the elements present in this compound here. And yet you may also be asked in the worksheet to identify how many of each. So the 3 is connected only to the hydrogen, so we know that there's 3 hydrogens and 1 nitrogen. Okay, so now we're moving on to word equations. So word equations are basically recipes for how to make different compounds, just to put it in a really simple way here. So in the same way that you have a recipe for making a cake, you'd have egg plus flour plus butter plus sugar makes a cake. The ingredients here are, in a word equation, what we would call the reactants, and you put them all next to each other with plus symbols in between them. And the cake is what we call the product. And something you might notice here in red, we have an arrow. So that's how we show that there are our reactants and our products. We never use an equal sign, we always use an arrow. So now to put it in a more relevant context for us, here's an example of a word equation showing that hydrogen and oxygen combine together to make water. So we already spoke about before about how H2O is made up of hydrogen and oxygen, so we can just put them quite simply into a word equation like this. Again, the ones on the left side in blue are reactants, and water is our product, so that's the thing that's made. So there's some new keywords there, so make sure you're really clear on them. The product is the thing that's made in a word equation, and the reactants are on the left-hand side of a word equation. Okay, so this is a practice question for us to try together. So carbon and oxygen join together to make the compound carbon dioxide. So it's important you read the question carefully here, because I've actually told you which elements join together to make carbon dioxide, but you may already know this because we looked at it earlier. Our CO2, we knew that was carbon and oxygen. So complete the word equation, so I'll give you a minute to think about this, or please pause the video so you can maybe have a go at this. Okay, so we've put carbon in here and oxygen here, carbon plus oxygen, arrow, showing that they make carbon dioxide. So there'll also be some questions on word equations in your worksheet. So again, come back and look at this part if you're not sure. So that's all the new information for today. So you should now be clear where the metals and non-metals are organised on a periodic table. You should know some common element symbols, some common compound formula, so like our carbon dioxide and water, and you should know how to write a word equation and be able to do that when you're given information in the question. So I'll leave you to get on with your work now. Please email your class teachers with any questions. And sorry again about the technical difficulties last week. We're looking forward to seeing you all at 2:10 on Friday.